Chapter 1. Hudson. The sound of glass shattering on the concrete floors drew my attention to the back corner of the bar. Loud voices could be heard over the music playing, and I blew out a heavy breath before placing the Pilsner glass in my hand next to the bar sink. Fuck. It was one of those nights. College towns were fucking chaos during the fall semester, and while my regular clientele was a little rough around the edges, those drunken frat boys who wanted to slum it couldn't fucking help themselves. Before I could hoist myself over the bar, the crowd of drunken 20-somethings parted, and a flash of purple hair caught my attention. My little sister's best friend had what looked to be a frat bro, in a pink polo shirt, no less, in a headlock, and was holding 2 fingers on his right hand in a very precarious manner. One wrong move and he'd be jerking off with his left for the foreseeable future. If she left him with anything to jerk off. One of the bouncers followed behind her, shaking his head as she marched the jackass towards the door. Charlie West was fucking crazy, so if that guy touched her, he was lucky his balls were still intact and not crammed down his throat. When she'd first asked me for a job while she was finishing grad school, I'd been hesitant, but she handled being a waitress in a crowded dive bar like a pro. She didn't let patrons get away with anything shady and brought in enough tips to keep paying her rent, which took the pressure off me since she lived with my sister in the apartment above the bar. "Need help?" I shouted, cupping my hand next to my mouth so Mikey could hear me. I think she's got it under control," he yelled back with a laugh, gesturing in front of him while Charlie marched Mr. Grappy Hands toward the exit. Her legs shot out in front of her, kicking the door to the bar wide open as she shouted at the people loitering outside.
"Move, you fuckers! I'm trying to take out the trash."
Mikey took over from there, grabbing the guy by the back of his shirt and disappearing into the parking lot. Chances were he'd confiscate the douchebag's keys and order him an Uber, courtesy of the bar, but I was glad he was out of my establishment. People came here to have a good time, and I wouldn't let some punk-ass kids come in and start shit. Which made me sound about 90 years old, but I'd left my troublemaking days behind when I'd become a business owner at 26. If my dad's goal when he signed the bar over 4 years ago had been for me to take my future seriously, well, it had worked. Charlie came back in, wiping her hands on the short denim skirt, smirking at me as she slipped under the overhang of the bar. She was all of 5'5", but the girl had a black belt in Taekwondo and could put you in the hospital if you fucked with her. I'd learned years ago not to fuck with her. Hazel would give me an enormous amount of shit if I messed with her best friend. Charlie was practically joined at the hip with my little sister and had been a thorn in my side since she was 10 years old.
"What's up, boss man?"
She reached under the bar for a shot glass, slamming it down on the counter before she grabbed a bottle of peach vodka. I watched, crossing my arms over my chest as she poured herself a shot. She winked at me before she threw it back, and I tried not to let her get to me. "What have I told you about drinking on the clock?" She shrugged, reaching for the bottle again, but I pulled it away, blocking her with my body as she tried to get it back.
"Oh, come on, I earned that."
"You earned the first one. You're done." There was no way I was sending her back out there with any more alcohol in her system. The reason she was so good at her job was because she was quick to react, so things didn't escalate. Or you're back here with me for the rest of the night. She narrowed her eyes, and I was gearing up for her to give me shit, but she just huffed and glared at me.
"The tips back here suck."
"Not my problem. You get drunk on my watch, I gotta babysit you, and I don't have the time or the patience for that. If you weren't aware, you're a bit of a handful."
2 shots won't get me drunk. You're such a buzzkill sometimes.
I knew it wouldn't, but I also didn't need her stuck behind the bar with me. Every time she bartended, we'd end up slammed at the counter. I wasn't naive enough to think it was because of my charming personality. Charlie's short skirts lured them all in, and I'd spend the night trying to keep up with the drooling masses competing for her attention. My girlfriend, Vivienne, hadn't understood why I gave Hazel and Charlie jobs, thinking my sister and her friend were being freeloaders. She didn't catch that both of them had more than earned their places on the rotation, and business was typically higher when the 2 of them worked together. It also pissed off Viv when I worked too closely with Charlie. The 2 of them had a striking resemblance to each other, and any casual glance was construed as me being attracted to my little sister's best friend. Since I'd never thought of Charlie in the same way that I did about Viv, I hadn't understood why she got all bent out of shape over it, but I tried to keep my distance to keep the peace. Hazel floated between the back of the house and the bar, making sure the food service was running smoothly, while our dad had officially turned River Run Tavern over to me. He wanted her to always have a soft place to land. She was currently taking some online illustration courses, so I know she used her tips to supplement her expenses until her illustration commissions picked up.
Hey, sexy bartender.
A high-pitched feminine voice called from the end of the bar, and I watched as Charlie rolled her eyes. Before Vivienne noticed her, she spun on her heel and hoisted herself onto the bar, sliding off the far side without giving the guys at the closest table too much of a show. They kept their eyes on their drinks when they saw the glare I'd aimed at them. As soon as I saw she was safely back on the floor, I returned my attention to the woman trying to get my attention. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I asked, bracing my forearms on the worn wood. The petite platinum blonde pushed herself forward and laid a kiss on my cheek before she settled back on her stool.
When can you get out of here?
I watched as she idly twirled a curl around her index finger. Viv was only 2 years younger than me at 28, but sometimes she acted and dressed like she was younger than my 24-year-old sister, which was fine when we'd met 4 years ago, but at just over 30, I wasn't trying to relive my glory days. Her skin-tight crop tank top hugged her generous curves that had been what attracted me to her in the first place, and what continued to attract attention from my patrons. She'd never acted on it when men hit on her, but I could tell she enjoyed the attention. Trailing my eyes down her body, I could see a sliver of the toned, artificially tanned skin of her stomach, leading it to a pair of tight jean shorts. There's a stark contrast to what she wore during the week. Her closet full of tailored blouses and pencil skirts and sky-high heels. She may have dressed the part of party girl on the weekends, but I knew the polished persona she cultivated at the office was who she really was. Bar closes in 2 hours. I'm the last man on tonight. Typically, I traded schedules with the other 2 barbacks, alternating who covered the weekends. But since I wanted to celebrate Halloween off the clock in a few days, I'd been on weekends for the last 3 weeks to make up for it.
Can't you sneak out early?
She whined, cocking her head to the side. Her lashes fluttered, and she pushed out her bottom lip into a pout. A move that had once worked on me, but I wouldn't let her manipulate me into being a shitty boss because I cared about my employees' opinions of me.
You never have time to come hang out with me anymore. You were a lot more fun when you didn't take everything with the bar so seriously.
I knew I was disappointing her, but this bar meant financial security, and I had to take it seriously if I didn't want to let everyone else down in my life. My parents were expecting me to keep the business alive. My sister depended on her income waitressing to cover the expenses for online classes and art supplies, and my employees depended on the money they made in tips. If things started falling apart because I wanted to spend more time with my girlfriend, everyone would suffer. Viv, you know I can't. I get off at 3, like normal.
But I'll be too tired to stay up by then.
My temples throbbed at the shrill tone in her voice. Oh, I hated she couldn't just take no for an answer. I'd never come into her job during work hours and expected her to drop everything to keep me entertained. Just because she worked in an office during the day didn't mean that my job during my work hours was any less important. Then maybe I'll just crash in my office. Sundays were typically when I did inventory, before our weekly food delivery, so it'd be easier if I didn't have to drive back and forth. When I'd first taken over the bar, I lived upstairs, but when Hazel finished art school and moved back home, I'd bought a place a few blocks away, so she didn't have to live with our parents. Viv narrowed her eyes, turned to scan the room for my sister.
You're not planning to stay in their apartment, are you?
No, I sighed, reaching up to resituate my black hat on my sweaty hair. The fact that she immediately went there added to my simmering irritation. I'll stay on the couch in my office, downstairs, not upstairs. Charlie and Hazel shared the modest 2-bedroom apartment above the bar now, and it was almost unrecognizable from when I lived there. My sister was girly as fuck and had painted enormous flowers on most of the walls in the living room. I wasn't their landlord. Our dad technically was, but I made sure the girls had everything they needed and served as their handyman if anything went wrong.
I wanted to talk to you about something.
She looked upset I wasn't making myself available to her, but I had responsibilities beyond making her happy. Sometimes it felt more like I was an accessory for her to parade around than her partner. Her partner who was a grown adult with an adult job. After I'm done with inventory, putting away the shipment, and getting next week's orders in, I'll come to your apartment.
Ugh, I guess that's fine.
She sighed, but I knew she was pissed at me. I'd blown her off a lot lately. She expected me to drop everything at a moment's notice, but this bar was my future. My father hadn't kept this place running for 20 years by cutting out early and shirking his responsibilities. Before I could dwell on how I could diffuse her attitude, the front door of the bar opened and a dozen more college students joined the melee. You want a drink? We're slammed and I need to get back to work. Viv shook her head, her face pinched in anger, but I shrugged it off and blew out a breath. When I looked back up, she was already absorbed in her phone, while I escaped to the other end of the bar to serve my new patrons. She'd been irritated with me for months, after I told her I didn't want to sell my house to move into something newer together. I'd considered it, but I kept weird hours and didn't know how she'd cope with that. I also didn't want to move in together just because we'd been together for a few years. Things had been casual between us when we started dating, and just never stopped. But she'd been hinting she wanted more lately. I just wasn't sure I could give her more. She hadn't protested my job when we met. She'd even mistakenly thought that I was just a bartender, not the owner of the bar. My dad had still been involved in the day-to-day back then. And when he finally retired and I stepped into his shoes, she hadn't been happy that it meant I wasn't free whenever she called me. As I watched her overly manicured fingers fly over her phone screen, I tried to find traces of the girl I'd fallen for. I wasn't sure she was there anymore, beneath the carefully curated surface of the woman that she'd become.
You can listen to the rest of the book in the Tempt Romance audiobooks app, available on the App Store and Google Play. The link to the book is in the description. Discover even more bestsellers and exclusive stories updated weekly, only in Tempt Romance audiobooks.